Charles Schwab has released its proprietary STAX report for the month of August. Here to discuss all the details, Joe Mazzola, head trading derivative strategist at Charles Schwab. Joe, always great to see you. We gave a little hint earlier in the week. We were talking about what we may be looking for. What did we learn from the August STAX report?
You gave a little bit of hint in your last section with you and Tom covered some of the symbols that you're going to see, but this was a really interesting month, Nicole. We've seen for a while there's been a bit of a divergence between kind of what the S&P 500's done and versus the STAX, where S&P 500 keeps chugging along, and the STAX, look, it's been going up, but it hasn't been moving maybe at the same clip. Well, this is a month where all of that changed, and so what we saw for the month of August was we saw the STAX up about 4.5%, took it up to 43.69. S&P 500 during that same period was really only up about 1.1%. So clear outperformance from the STAX. What drives that outperformance, I think, is what the real question is, and that is clients feeling pretty bullish, and then kind of rotating into some of those names that a little bit of a higher beta to them. Will cause a little bit more volatility. They're embracing that a bit more, and that pushed that score up for the month. When I think of the top three buys, like I said, you and Tom were talking about a few of them there, but Nvidia was number one, Palantir was number two, both a little bit higher beta names, and then UNH, which is which of these three is not like the other. I mean, that's UNH it was interesting to see. One of the things that, Nicole, we see quite a bit is clients love to buy the dip. When you look at a stock like UNH, they traded down to about 230 during that STAX period in August. Clients jumped all over it for that opportunity, scooped it up, and you can see where it's at today. It's had a nice run.
It's really interesting to see how the Mag 7 are split in the buys and the sells. You noted Nvidia on there. You have Amazon and Microsoft also were in the buy STAX list. But on the sells, some of the other Mag 7 names were in the sell list, right?
Yeah, you had Apple, Meta, Tesla's once again back on the sell list. I would say it was a bit of a common theme in terms of discretionaries were something that we saw sold a little bit. That would have that I think Tesla probably kind of led that. Apple was interesting just because it did finally break out, right? It had been in this trading range for a while. Had a pretty decent earnings report. Then you had the announcement that they're going to be investing more in the U.S. and that kind of maybe you could make the case that got the federal government off its back a little bit, created a little bit of breathing room for the company, and in essence, a little bit of breathing room for the stock. That was definitely more of a fade for clients. The Meta one is interesting because Meta, it doesn't always do this, but it tends to move in one direction off of earnings and then sometimes fades the move. And that's exactly what you saw happen after the Meta earnings. You saw about a 10% move to the upside over the next day or two of trading. Clients faded that. Now I want to clarify, it doesn't necessarily mean that they sold the stock, but it could mean that they trimmed some of the longs, took off some of that exposure that they had, given the move that they saw in the stock, and pared back some of those gains. So I thought that was interesting. The last, if I'm thinking of the top three, the last one was a new entrant, and that's Reddit, which was really interesting. I've never seen it on the top 10 list before, more or less the top three. And there it was as a top three sell. And once again, it just happens to be another one of those stocks that had a pretty substantial move to the upside during that period. And, as is kind of the theme that we see quite a bit, you buy the dip, you sell the rip, and that's what we saw on Reddit.
Also saw last time we spoke, and I don't have it handy, but weren't people looking into some fixed income or things that were a little, at one point they were looking into hedging or being more cautious. Did you sense more bullishness or bearishness in some of the actions you read through?
So let's talk about actions first, and then we'll talk about maybe sentiment in terms of attitudinal sentiment. So remember, STAX measures action, that's behavior. And so what we saw in August, yes, we saw the net inflows into fixed income, not to the same extent that we'd seen in the prior few months. I think, part of that probably has to do with the fact that you saw interest rates come down a little bit. So when they were a little bit higher, there's an inverse relationship, right? Higher rates means lower bond prices. So it's a little bit more attractive for clients to buy when yields were higher. As those yields started to kind of pull back a little bit, you didn't see nearly as much buying there. ETFs, we did see some buying momentum there. Same thing on the mutual fund side. Now, what I will say on the behavior side, that we just covered that. On the attitudinal side, it's a little bit different, and I think this is interesting. And it always goes, back to the do as I do, not as I say, right? Well, this is what clients did, and here's what they said. What they said was they're feeling more bearish. We definitely saw a real drop in attitudinal sentiment. On the bullish side, dipped 7 points down to 28% of clients responding, so they were bullish. The percentage of clients responding that said they were bearish, that jumped 10 points to 37%. And that was, we kind of look at traders versus investors. Saw a bigger jump in the bearishness from the investor investor clients. And when we ask them, hey, what's driving this pessimism? What's causing that? There's a few things. There's a concern about market valuations. And I think that would probably make sense, especially when you see that the sector that they sold the most heavily was IT. So there's concerns around market valuations, specifically around tech valuations. There's concerns around inflation as that comes in from the tariff and trade policy. What will rate policy be? And then one thing that was really interesting, kind of anecdotally, is we did hear some talk around, hey, we're concerned about whether or not there'll still be Fed independence. And I thought that was an interesting one to hear. When I do look at, what clients are saying specifically around the trade policy, we asked, do we believe that that will drive market volatility? And 75% of the clients that responded, yeah, no, they do foresee, at least in the near term, that driving some market volatility.
That's interesting. Okay. Joe Mazzola, thank you for all the very latest on the proprietary data from Charles Schwab, the STAX report. We do wait for it each month, so thank you. Joe Mazzola, head trading derivative strategist, Charles Schwab Company. Thank you.